Welcome to the Blackburn End Podcast. It's a week off from Rovers for us fans, and thank God after those last performances. Hopefully, Eustace has the answers and we bounce back when we do return this week. But until then, we have a bit of a pod special for you. But first off, let me introduce my co-host, Mark. Mark, did you watch any of the England games?
I watched 5 minutes of yesterday, and that was enough for me, thank you. I find England extremely difficult to watch outside of tournaments, if I'm being honest yet.
100%. We may as well have a quick chat about international football in general. I'll be honest, I'm one of those fans, unless it's a major tournament, I don't really watch it. And if it's a major tournament, I will watch Cape Verde versus Cook Islands as long as it's at a major tournament. I just can't be bothered. I feel like it's just boring. It's just boring football.
Yeah, quite often England friendlies, you're playing Malta at home and you know the outcome. Was I remotely interested the other day? Well, I didn't actually know we were playing yesterday until later on. That's about as my interest level, isn't it? I suppose I was half interested to see him trying to fit every number 10 in the world in one team. But as I've told you before, I don't particularly like Lee Carsley, so I wasn't that upset either.
Well, I was going to bring that up. He's ruled himself out of the England job, apparently. Well, I also am going to rule myself out of the England job. Mark, do you want to rule yourself out of the England job as well?
No, I've seen the rumoured pay. I'm firmly in the race if anyone wants to. Even just for a couple of camps, I'll step in if we want.
Well, I'd love to be able to talk about England and potential managers, but you just never know. I mean, they're talking about Pep, they're talking about Tuchel, all of this, and you just never know. I mean, I don't really want to get onto the Southgate debate because that one definitely splits a lot of fans. But yeah, England for me, I'm proud when they're in a tournament. You know they're going to get to tournaments, but this Nations League, it's not for me. I'd prefer just to call it what it is, and it's a pre-season friendly, and just give Adam Wharton some caps so we can get some of that money.
1,000,000%. I was actually talking to on Adam Wharton. I was talking to a Palace fan yesterday and asking why he's getting pelted and what's going on. He said he's come back from the Euros mentally and physically not fit. He said he just looks completely drained. He said no Palace fans are having a pop at him. It's all external people who are fans of Manu, for example, who have an agenda in not wanting Adam Wharton to take Manu's place or be ahead of him. So Palace fans are firmly behind him and they just think he's not fully fit. That's all. So, yeah, that reassured me a bit.
Well, at the end of the day, progress isn't a straight line, is it? You know, exactly. You are going to be up and down. He's made a big leap. I didn't expect him to do what he did last year at Palace, and we definitely didn't expect him to be called up to England. So at the end of the day, he's had a taste. He knows what he can do. Hopefully he does carry on and develop because he is one of our own, and we do want him to be successful. And obviously his success financially benefits us, which is awesome. So that's enough about international football for the moment. We do have a game coming up against Swansea, which technically is international football for us. We are playing a European side of Swansea City. How are you feeling about this game? Because obviously we've come off the back of a couple of terrible performances. We've had a couple of players go off on international duty. Do you think we're going to see a different Rovers?
I hope so. I mean, different to the last two games, obviously, we're meaning. I think what you'd said in the last pod, Mike, is very true. I think, obviously, every next game is the most important, but I think this is very important. This 3-game period, but particularly the Swansea game, how we perform, how we set up, the starting 11 will tell us an awful lot. So Eustace left the end of the last couple of games saying he learned more about the players, he'd learned more about new players, and he didn't sound like he particularly appreciated what he'd learned. So I think the starting 11 will tell us an awful lot. Bar or Hashi, because I think it's Thursdays that he plays. So, Tuesday he plays, Tuesday 11:30, which is tomorrow as we're recording. So he's probably not going to be back in England late Wednesday at the earliest. Very, very unlikely or Hashi's going to feature at weekend, maybe on the bench for a 10-minute salvo. So park him. But in terms of the rest of the team, I think his starting lineup will be very interesting and his approach will. And equally, the performance. Even if it was a draw, or even in some cases, if you're a bit unlucky and we lost the game, I don't think that will tell us as much as the performance. The way we perform against Swansea, for me, tells us where we will be by the end of the season.
100% agree. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and it's one of those where you think, would you prefer to have a good performance but you draw, or a poor performance but you win? And I just want to see some good performances now. Now, obviously, I want a good performance and a win. That goes without saying. But I do want us to have that good performance. We come up against West Brom the game after that. And like you say, we're coming into a run of fixtures now where this is going to define, I think, our season. And considering it's very early in the season still, to have the start that we've had, I'm hoping that this is a blip and not just... I'm hoping the blip wasn't that we were playing well. The blip is that we've played poorly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we're going to see some changes. I'll be very surprised if we see the same starting 11, especially after the comments he made. I mean, Swansea are coming off the back of some tight results themselves. They drew 0-0 at Stoke. They lost 1-0 to Sheffield United. They drew 1-1 against Bristol, but they did beat Coventry away. So they're not a terrible side. It's a game I don't really want to predict because I think it's typical EFL. After the international break, anything can happen. But I completely agree with you. It's about the performance now. We've had some good results against Swansea in the past, but they've had some good results against us. I would ask if there's a Hitch's bet involved, but I'm not sure I could bet on this one.
No, I think the only one you would go for is probably under a certain amount of goals. I mean, they've scored... There's 3 goals involved in the Coventry game. Other than that, there's not been more than 2 goals in a game, has there? But I think what you're saying, I agree with, Mike. I feel we're not going to be in the promotion race. I'd like us to be. So I need this season to look at something and be able to get behind something, to be able to see some progress. So that's why the performance is massively important. Equally, this isn't a season-defining 1, 2, or obviously not 2 points, but 1 point or 3 point. It's about the performance to show us, right, that's where we're heading this season. That's the type of football we're actually going to see on the whole. Because at the minute, like you say, is the blip the 2 games, or is the out of the ordinary the opening bit of the season? Equally, I just think that Rovers fans are still on the fence with Eustace. And I think this next run until the next international break could swing it completely either way. I think it will cement their opinion of him. So there's still fans who are on the fence thinking he's too defensive, didn't enjoy the football last season. There's fans who think, well, do you know what? He did a job last season. Let's ignore that. And actually this season we've started really well. And then there's obviously those in the middle. So let's not forget we're 100% record at home. Keeping that going will be massive. We've got 6 home wins last year. We've got 4, is it already? So keeping that going is massive, absolutely massive for a club like us, because we need to make it look like a really horrible place to come, because it became far too easy to come to Ewood and take points away, didn't it, over the last 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, and that comes down to the fans as well. The fans need to get behind the team. I openly admit I don't get to go to as many games because of my coaching, because of my lads playing. So my lad, I haven't got 2, I've just got the 1. So my lad playing. So I don't get to go to as many games, but the ones that go, I hope that they do, support and to get behind, because when I do get to go, there is negativity that comes in, and you get that at all grounds. Yeah. I mean, there's still people waiting for pairs to make mistakes. There's people waiting for strikers to fluff their chances and all of this. And I just feel like we have something now that we can hopefully build on, and it does start with this game. Again, like you said, we just need one to go in for him and prove some of the doubters wrong, because there's doubters coming in. Hashi, he needs a break after this international break, so I don't think we're going to see him. I'm concerned about the goals. It's going to be a concern to me until we find that guy that's going to be getting those goals. And I'm hoping it is Gay. I'm hoping it is Leonard. I'm hoping it is Ohashi. But for me, the concern at the moment now is goals. Are there any other concerns for you, or is it just that final third?
I think it's just more I wouldn't say performance, but I'd say our tactics, in the sense of, I feel we're too easy to play against at times because we don't have anybody who breaks those lines. We don't have anybody who runs it beyond. I talked in the last pod that never happened until Rankin Costello came on. And not only did he go beyond the midfield, he went beyond the strikers. I don't feel we've got anybody with blistering pace that will run in behind. Cozy Dewberry showed that he's got some quick feet, but I'm not necessarily seen blistering pace from him yet. And I'm yet to see anybody run beyond the strikers. And that's why I do like it when Ohashi plays in that 10 role, because it gives you that option too. That's probably not going to happen at weekend, but that's my concern. I just think at times we could be very, very easy to play against. Equally, that could lead to a very, very dull performance at Ewood if teams come and just sit in, because I think we'll struggle. So Cantwell's got to have a big, big say in that, hasn't he? He's our Stardust, if you like.
And we are getting happier with the squad as we go along. Players are showing that they've got something about them, Cantwell being one of them. Some of the youth players coming through, like your Durus and Tijons, we're looking at those and I'm thinking, well, actually, these are guys that we can, get behind. Are they going to be the next Wharton? Not necessarily saying that, but hopefully they're players that can come in. So from a Swansea point of view, is there anyone on that team that you're worried about? Or because, there's no one that jumps off for me that makes me think, but I don't want to jinx that. Because I'll be honest, last time we spoke about Swansea at home, I completely jinxed it. So I hate talking about Swansea at home.
Well, I think we should learn our lesson, Mike. The last time we did a podcast previewing any game, we said, well, what we won't see is Rovers absolutely capitulating. We'll at least see performances. And we were really confident. And we may as well have just gone and, peed on our own chips. So I'm just going to stay stum on that.
100% agree. Let's move on. Hopefully we're talking positive on Monday. But like we said, this is a pod special. We're not just going to talk about the Rovers games like we usually do. So we're going to move on from this, and hopefully we are getting that result on Saturday. But before we do carry on, Mark, do you have a Retro Rovers for us? You're on mute, Mark. Always got to be a technical issue with us somewhere, hasn't there?
Listen, probably on mute. People have asked for that for a while. Right, here we go. So I think this one's nice and easy. But, I write them. So we go. From Great Harwood Town, my journey began. Some of you will have that already. At Rovers under Hughes, I became a part of the plan. Ince also saw my talent, but Big Sam let me go. Next up was Greece, where my goals still show. I continued to travel, Cyprus, Australia and India too. But you'll always remember me as a super sub in the white and blue.
Definitely a cult hero, but also a cult villain for a particular team that my friend supports. I think I've got it. We'll discuss that later. But yeah, that's a good one. So we've got two topics that we want to talk about today as part of our international special. We talked about this a few weeks ago, actually a few months ago, about our strikers, and I did a lot of stats to do with the strikers, and I decided to have a look at the goalkeepers as well. So when it comes to the goalkeepers, we have had quite a few since the year 2000, and I just wanted to break down some stats. Now, there's not as many stats when it comes to goalkeepers as there is the strikers. So this isn't a full goalkeeper special. And I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of everything. This is just bog standard stats. Take it as you will, but there's some interesting ones. So, Mark, how many goalkeepers do you think we've had play more than 10 games for Rovers, including loans, since 2000? It's a difficult question, and you wasn't prepared for this one.
No, it's all right. So we've got 24 years there. Thanks. I've got the first bit right. So I'm going to go, I'm just going to have it, 12.
15.
Ooh, okay.
We've had 15 goalkeepers play 10 games or more, including loans. So I'm just going to run. I've actually put them in an order of something, and I don't really want to give away.
On that list?
He is not. He is not. We've got the likes. We've got. So we've got the likes of Friedel, Alan Kelly, Raya, Jason Brown, Kaminsky, Jake Keane, John Phelan, Jason Steele, Luke Weiler, Walton, Robinson, Bunn, Eastwood, and then obviously Volstead and Pears. So we've had some names there. These have all played 10 games or more for the club. Now, I've got some interesting facts. So overall minutes per goal conceded. Now, I am going off the stats on transfermarket.com. Now, you would have thought the longer that a player goes minutes-wise than conceding there, the better the goalkeeper. But obviously, we understand that games may be played. So who would you have near the bottom of that list? So who's conceded the most goals? Sorry, the goals per minutes. So
right. So I'm going to base this a little on the team he was probably playing in. So I'm going to say Mark Bunn.
So you think Mark Bunn
could be down
one
there.
of the? Okay. So Mark Bunn conceded 50 every 57th minute. And there's two worse than him.
Jake Keane.
Jake Keane's actually one of the best.
Is he?
This is crazy stats.
Because that was a poor. Well, I suppose we were floating around.
He used to do my head in. He did.
We were floating around the playoffs that time. I mean, we had a good team, didn't we? Tuhu, Murphy, Diego Rosado. Walton. It's got to be Walton.
Walton was better than Mark Bunn. He conceded every 66 minutes. So people are going to love who's the worst goalkeeper we've had from 2000 based on how often they concede, and that is Leo Volstead. Leo Volstead is statistically our worst goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So in 25 appearances, he's conceded a goal every 52 minutes. The next one, with 201 appearances for Rovers, and he's actually played for Rovers more than any other club, which I thought was strange. Paul Robinson.
Robinson played for us more than any other club. Jeez.
Any other club?
Actually, on the logic of Mark Bunn, Robinson was probably in one of the. I know we've been relegated from the Championship, but he did play 2 years under that absolute clown, didn't he? Really, so. And we were a joke, so that kind of makes sense, I suppose.
So he was second with 54. Every 54 minutes, he'd concede.
Mike,
and when it came to clean, I'm going to get to clean sheets in a sec on him, but then it's Mark Bunn after, and he was 15 appearances and every 57 minutes.
So I'm Paul Robinson as a goalkeeping expert, Mike. I'd be interested to know your views. My views as an outfield observer, but I felt that if you shot close range, he was okay. Bizarrely, almost the further out you got, if you're in that 20 yard, 25 yards out, his feet were nowhere near quick enough. He couldn't get across. I used to think he really struggled diving to his left. And just generally, I thought he was poor. Now, he looked too bulky, didn't he? I don't think he was overweight necessarily, but he looked too big, too muscular.
He didn't have the agility,
He didn't have the agility at all. And I knew we were spoiled because we'd had Flowers, we'd had obviously Friedel. For me, Robinson was bang average. He must have been better than that when he played for England. What was your view of Robinson's time at Rovers?
Okay, so I wasn't a fan of him. He was one of those where I just didn't feel like he made massive errors. He had errors in him, but they weren't massive errors. But he just didn't do anything amazing. Didn't do anything right. I'll be honest. I need to go back and rewatch because I don't want to be too harsh on him, because there's going to be memories of mine where I'm looking and thinking, well, actually, he was pretty poor, but I don't remember many details of him. I just remember him being very meh. Like he came with a bit of fanfare because England goalkeeper, and he'd had a history of being obviously considered a really good goalkeeper. He played Champions League, hadn't he? So he did play Champions League at least. That wasn't Nigel Martin, was it?
No, I think he did, didn't he? But it could have been Nigel Martin. But I mean, he must have been close to it at Tottenham as well. So
yeah, he obviously played a high level. Yeah, and he was. But the thing is, he was following Friedel. You know, obviously after Friedel, we're trying to find our hero, and we couldn't. I'd need to look at him again. I'd need to analyse it. I just remember him just being the kind of goalkeeper where I didn't rely on him to do anything amazing, but yet he didn't make massive errors. He had a few, but not enough in those 201 games for me to say he was massively unreliable. I need to look back on that really. But yeah, he's when you're coming for $4.5 million and you've had the history he's had, I kind of expected him to do more. I mean, he didn't actually have that many. You know, he did actually have he had 47 clean sheets in 201 games. So that's not awful.
Now,
but it's not fantastic.
No, the context of all of that, though. I mean, he's coming under Paul Ince and we couldn't defend properly. Big Sam's come in, and that will be probably where most of his clean sheets are. And then he's had the unmentionable one after that. And then he was probably still catching before the end of that season when I think Jake Keane got in, Sanomierski. He'll still have caught some of the mayhem, won't he, under Appleton and those kind of guys. So to be fair to him, the one decent manager in that mix is probably I bet under Allardyce his record was very good, to be fair. So I feel
and that's what I mean. That's why I don't really want to go in on him too much. I remember not being wowed by him. But again, there were so many issues in the team, but I didn't feel like he was one of those issues. But I didn't. I feel like if you'd put Friedel in there, we would have conceded less, if you know what I mean. But then again, Friedel was just an absolute hero and a man mountain. So let's get on to the better goalkeepers. Okay, who do you think has actually concedes the least over the most minutes, if you know what I mean? I need to figure out how to word all this. So again,
Jason Brown.
He's third. 16 games, 77 minutes per goal conceded.
I remember him coming in and just having a good run, but
he was all right, wasn't he? Solid.
Yeah, solid. Okay, so above Jason Brown, Raya
was fifth. His was very close. 108 appearances, 75 minutes per goal conceded.
Go on, we'll go Kaminsky.
Kaminsky was fourth. 118 games, 77 minutes per goal conceded. Second is a crazy one. That is Jake Keane. That's for Jake Keane. Number one was, I believe, Player of the Year at the time, John Phelan. 71 appearances, 84 minutes per goals conceded.
And that's
he had 23 clean sheets in 71 games. And I remember him being really solid. I remember him taking a few hits as well. I mean, he nearly broke his neck on the pitch once.
Yeah,
dives, catch it, and then he landed funny. But yeah, he was cracking keeper.
He came in when Flowers' hips had gone and the season we went down. Then he played the beginning part of the next one. Then Alan Kelly took over, and we weren't doing well, were we, in the Championship at that point? So those stats are actually really not what I would expect at all.
And again, we take all this with a pinch of salt. They might have better defenders in front of them, so on and so forth. I mean, I am thinking about doing a video just based on goalkeepers and explaining myths and so on, and how stats don't mean anything. And here I am talking about stats. So I'm going to go in order. So we have John Phelan. He has conceded every 84 minutes. Jake Keane, 80. Jason Brown, 77, tied with Kaminsky, who's also 77. Raya and an absolute legend in Brad Friedel, 75. So Brad Friedel played the most games at 357. He conceded 429 goals, which was the most out of this list. But when you've played that many games, you'll go into. And he had 119 clean sheets and conceded every 75 minutes. And he is our goalkeeping top goal scorer with 1 goal. So the thing is when we're talking about these stats, the more games you play, the more chances you've got of making mistakes and conceding and things like that. On this list, it's obvious Friedel was our best goalkeeper by a country mile. A lot of these played League One, Championship. He played Premier League as well as that. Was he 1 season or was he 2 seasons in Division 1?
Friedel was, no, he came early on in the season, but in the season that we got promoted.
Yeah. So he did have a few games, but generally he would have played much tougher opposition in a much tougher league, obviously. So I am taking that into account. After him, it is Alan Kelly, 50 appearances, 74 minutes per goal conceded. And then Jason Steele. Every 72 minutes, he would concede. Jason Lupweiler, 69 minutes. And then Ainsley Pears, 68 minutes. Every 68 minutes, he concedes a goal. And then Christian Walton, terrible goalkeeper at 66. Simon Eastwood, another terrible goalkeeper at 62 minutes. And then Mark Bunn, Paul Robinson, and Leo Volstead. Some other interesting stats. So career appearances-wise, obviously, Friedel knocks everyone out of the park at 357, but Paul Robinson had 201 appearances. After that, it is Kaminsky at 118. It is Jason Steele at 120, then Kaminsky at 118 appearances, then Raya at 108. Everyone else is under the hundreds. So we did actually have some spells with goalkeepers, didn't we? I just remember us bouncing around with the Jake Keanes and so on. It seemed like we was just bouncing around goalkeepers trying to find one, didn't we?
Yeah, they were poor, weren't they? And then we settled on Steele, who seemed the best of a very bad bunch. But then we found Raya. Now, fans had a right pop at Raya early on, saying, he was kicking it into the Riverside the whole time. But for me, I always think, and I might be wrong in this, and obviously, tell me if you disagree, Mike. I know you will. But when I look at a keeper, particularly a young keeper, if they're saving things that I don't expect them to save, I think that's a cracking start because, obviously, but by that I mean, even if they're doing other things wrong, so if they're kicking the ball into the stands, they're doing whatever, I always think they're kind of coachable things. Whereas if your reactions or you're getting to things that you should have no right to be getting to, I always think, do you know what? We can work with the rest of that. I almost put it akin to an outfield player when they've got the physical elements and they can control the ball better than anyone else. Or that player where, now I'm going to use an example here who is probably not the best example, but he came onto the field as a young player and was always in space, and that's John Buckley. And that's why I always stick up for him and want more from him, is because you can't teach that. How many players do you see and they're crowded out all the time? He finds space, and he did when he made his debut. And with a keeper, I think there's some things that you just can't teach, or maybe you can refine them. But Raya used to make some saves, and his reactions, I mean, obviously we've seen them to the extreme now when he made that double penalty save. But he used to make some saves, and you think, you've no right to make that save. There's so many times that he made saves where I was going, you were going, how has he saved that? Don't get me wrong, there was some basic errors and repeated errors, but there were always things that I thought, yeah, but you can eradicate them.
Well, okay, so I don't want you to put 50p in me and I don't stop because I will rant about goalkeepers all day, as you know. So I 100% agree with what you're saying about agility and things like that. And like, this is why I want to do a separate video. So there's obviously so many facets to a goalkeeper's game, and it could be using your feet, it could be using your hands, using your head, as in your mentality, it could be plucking them out the top corner, it could be one-on-ones, it could be how brave you are, how strong you are, how tall you are, how agile you are, all of these things. Raya, for me, mentally, he was making issues, but that's a young goalkeeper doing that. And I used to be frustrated with Raya, but that time I was kind of a little bit more naive when looking at him, because I was seeing things that I didn't quite like. Now, the question I have for a lot of people when they talk about goalkeepers, so I've got a bit of an issue at the moment with a group of friends that I have. Now, when I play in goal on a Sunday evening with some lads that I play with, I concede the least amount of goals. We're playing 9v9, which is like, imagine Masters. Do you know the Masters? Masters League. So that size goal. So I concede the least, and we win the game if I'm on their side. Now, that's not just me being arrogant, but it is 100% me being arrogant. But they'll come away and they'll say, "Well, you didn't have much to do tonight." So, okay, why is that? Well, you didn't make any saves. Yeah, because I didn't have to. Because I learned at a very late age, and this is why I didn't go anywhere, because, well, there's lots of stories reasons why I didn't go anywhere in my career, but I learned late that if you're in the right position, if you are safe and solid, you don't have to do the rest of things. If you get your position right, you don't need to pluck it out the top corner every single time. If you have a player on the edge of the box take a shot and you save out the top corner, fair enough. But if you've communicated with your defender to get to him, does that make you better? So you're stopping stuff happening before it happens. And I learned that very late. So I'm the one that at the end of the game, I've lost my voice because I've told everyone where they need to be. When a cross comes in, I'll come and claim it. Absolutely simple, because I've learned how to come and do that, and it just kills the game. So they don't see that. Now, he's actually my best mate, and I take the piss out of him for it, but he's in the other goal, and he's only like, well, I say only, he's like 5'8", something like that. So I'm much taller than him, and he's there diving around, save, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, oh my God, he's amazing. We can't get past him. And it's like, if he'd literally just caught the first shot, he wouldn't have to make the second save, third save, fourth save. So they're looking at thinking, this is an amazing goalkeeper. He's just made a triple save. Well, if he'd just held on to the first one, he wouldn't have to do the rest. Oh my God, look, he saved that header. What a save that is. Well, if he'd just come out and claimed the cross, he wouldn't have had to deal with that header. So there's a lot of that going into it. So when I'm looking at a goalkeeper, that's my rant over, by the way. So
enjoyed it.
When I'm looking at a goalkeeper, Friedel, he made some amazing saves, but he was so solid. He would come out, he would claim the crosses, he would just, everything was stuck to him. You rarely put it back into danger. The worst thing a goalkeeper can do is putting the ball back into danger. And that's when I'm looking at likes of pairs, when they come out for crosses and they're slapping it back into danger and stuff. And then they make another great save and you think, oh, what a save that is. It's like, yeah, but he made the mistake in the first. So who's the better goalkeeper? The one that's making the triple save but could have, or the one that actually came and claimed the cross and calmed everything down at the start? So to summarise the stats looking at all of this, I actually thought Mark Bunn was a decent goalkeeper, and he's bottom three, because I actually thought he was relatively solid playing, and he had a bit of a rough one. Paul Robinson, I actually thought he was relatively solid. He just didn't do anything amazing, and he was in a very poor side. And they're at the bottom. The ones at the top, John Phelan, he was a good keeper and he had a great career. But Jake Keane, 44 appearances, and it was 80 every 80 minutes he conceded a goal. Can I, in good heart, say that he was better than Kaminski? Absolutely not. But the stats are there. It's an interesting look to say that, if you're going off goals conceded, but all I'm going to say to people is take these stats with a pinch of salt, and it is the eyeball test. If you're looking at a goalkeeper and you think he's a safe goalkeeper, you have a good goalkeeper. If you're thinking he's got something in him to make a mistake, he's probably not the goalkeeper we need. But those are the stats. I'm definitely going to have to do a video based on goalkeeping, but it is going to be me ranting for 60 minutes of just tosh.
I enjoyed it. I think too many people have an opinion on goalkeepers and that's why I sort of will give you my opinion, but I will caveat it with the fact that I'm not a keeper. Quite often I watch enjoy it when Peter Schmeichel's on, and he'll say things like, get rid of the myth that you shouldn't get beaten at your near post. Yeah, generally that's right. However, and then he'll go on to explain why. So it's one of those things that, yeah, you can know football, yeah, you can play right back, and you can kind of have an idea what the striker maybe should have done. You can't do that with goalkeeping. You really can't. I think you go off of feeling, and if you feel safe with them, like you say, that's when you know you've got a decent keeper.
100%. And I'm not an expert in goalkeeping. I have an opinion. You could say it's an informed opinion. I've played, so I said between 5, 6, 7, and 11 aside games. I think I've played around 3,000 games because I played 4 times a week for so long. I'm doing my badges. I coach 7 hours a week, 3 of which are for goalkeepers. Only a lot of those are going into academies, local academies around here, female, male, all ages. So my mentor is Unreal Coach, and he's teaching me all these things. And I'm noticing different things with goalkeepers of what they should be doing. And it could be footwork, it could be things like that. I love watching the Rovers stuff they put out about Ben Benson doing his sessions. Some of them, like, I think it's staged a little bit just for the camera, just because it obviously it's quite boring goalkeeping training. A lot of the time it is just talking. But yeah, the only thing I will say to people is goalkeeping, I believe, is a very high percentage of mental state. I think it's up there with a striker, having like a block in front of goal, a mental block in front of goal. Goalkeeping is exactly the same. I went through a stage where I couldn't dive to my left properly. No idea why. I couldn't get my leg out of the way. I was injuring myself. I was hurting my hip just because I had this mental block of going down to my left. And it got worse and worse because then I was thinking to myself, oh, that ball's coming to my left. What am I going to do? Oh, my God, I can't get that left foot out of the way. Oh, my God, and it's a goal. And mentally, it is so difficult. You're on your own. You've got the fans on your back. You've got loads of time to think about things and stuff. It's a very, very difficult position to play. I played at a level where I had loads of boozed up blokes behind me shouting. Like every time the ball came, they're like shouting, "Keep, you're going to drop it, you're going to drop it, you're going to drop it." And it gets in your head, and it does. And it's very difficult. But these were the stats. It was interesting. I'm going to try and do a little bit more. I might do a video on goalkeeping as well at some point. I might get my mentor to come on because he actually assesses pro coaches in the game as well. So he's got a lot of knowledge. So I might try and get him on, but he's a very busy man, and he might want me to pay him. I'm not paying him. So yeah, so that's the goalkeepers. I thought it was quite an interesting one to go through, but we've got a more interesting one to go through with you, Mark. I'm going to hand over to you now. Now, before you get into this, you had the question of the week. Do you want to go through that before or after your segment?
No, we'll do it now. So, question of the week, and then if we get a chance, if we think we've time, we'll discuss it. But we're going to try and put a question of the week, aren't we? That's Mike's come up with a cracking idea. Let's have a bit of a debate. Hopefully, that'll then feed into the pod and we'll chat about it. But the question of the week this week was, which current Rover would you give a lifetime contract to right now? So obviously this time, it might have been this time last year, but when we discussed this last, we came up with, I think, did you say Jon Dahl Tomasson, Mike?
I was torn between Jon Dahl Tomasson and Greg Broughton, which shows exactly how much I know.
I think I'd said Greg Broughton at the same time. So yeah, nobody's gone down that route. So Rudy Gestead didn't have any nominations. So I narrowed it down. It was quite interesting, actually. So I'll let you have a think, Mike, if you haven't already, and we'll put each other on the spot at the end. I haven't actually overly thought about it. But so the 4 that were most commonly suggested were Igor Tijon, Scott Wharton, Owen Beck, and Lewis Travis. And the winner then put them into a poll just to try and get some consensus. And the winner was Owen Beck.
So I think that's not even our own.
That tells me that people just want to sign him desperately after, 3-4 games. But yeah. So yeah, look out for our question of the week. It will be out. By the time this comes out, I'll have whacked it out. So you'll have a new one out. Get involved. It was good. People got involved. So yeah. So you say it's more interesting, Mike. Maybe not. I have taken a leaf out of your book and I have gone Excel spreadsheet heavy. And this came about because last year and the year before, we got told, believe in the project. The project and the way a club like Blackburn Rovers gets forward and will progress to the Premier League is young players, buying them young, growing your own as well, and then getting to the Premier League with a team that you've got. And I agree to some extent, but my model club, if you like, was Brentford. Now, not Brentford in the Premier League, because I don't think you can judge a Championship team against Premier League. It's just completely different ball games. My reason for Brentford was they had a model of working whereby Ollie Watkins was at their club and he came in whenever it was, let's say the January. But he was there basically 6 months before they expected him to play a role in the first team. If he played one earlier, great. But they knew the peak value of somebody they were selling and they knew when they were going to sell them. And they would then sell those players that summer. And I think they sold Neil Maupay at one stage. And the replacement was not, oh my God, right, who do we go out and sign? So we've sold Smodics and we've gone, how do we replace him? That was not happening at Brentford. Brentford's replacements were already in the building. They were planning for, so in the Rovers squad now, we've talked about Hayden Carter, probably going to go to the Premier League at some point. Our replacement may well be Conor O'Riordan. Maybe that's what we are doing. Hopefully it is. But that's the kind of model that Brentford were working with, and that's the kind of model I think we need to work towards a bit more. However, lots of people point to Brighton. So I looked at Brighton and said, right, I remember Brighton playing in the Championship at Ewood. They had Gus Poyet as manager. They had Bruno at right back, who was about 93 at the time. They had lots of aging players. I don't remember Brighton being this young club. So I've gone back to 2017 when Brighton got promoted, and I've started my research there. So in 2017, the 3 promoted teams were Newcastle United, Brighton, and Aston Villa. The average age of those teams, Newcastle was 25.4, Villa was 26, and Brighton was 27.9. Now, from 2017 to now, that is the oldest an average team has been. And what I've also done is then brought down their net spend, if they have parachute payments, how many players they used, and looked at Rovers stats for each season. It won't come as any surprise that Rovers have had one of the youngest teams each season. So as we go through, I'll tell you the biggest spenders were that season, how much they spent, and then I'll compare it to Rovers. So that season, Newcastle, net spend, I've got how much they spent as well, but net spend spent £32 million. Rovers, net spend, was plus 11 million. It's no big surprise. Aston Villa were the biggest net spenders, though. £34 million they spent. And both of those teams, yes, of course, they had parachute payments. Brighton didn't have parachute payments, and they spent £7 million. So it's still considerably more than us. Rovers got relegated that season, and they had the 13th youngest team. So this is quite important. That season, Rovers went down, and they had Hope Akpan, Charlie Mulgrew, and they had Danny Graham in that team, but they had a lot of senior pros that we actually phased out. If you remember, we had Danny Guthrie's, we had Elliot Ward's, these kind of players that we then started to slowly bin off as we were going. And with that comes quite a high wage, an average wage. And we're led to believe that the wages are coming back up to the 2019 levels. So that'll be interesting in a minute. And I'll tell you why. So the season after, Rovers were obviously in League One, so we couldn't compare them for the purpose of the Championship. Wolves got promoted, no parachute payments. Cardiff got promoted and Fulham got promoted. Wolves are an anomaly here because they are one of only 2 teams that have ever been promoted since 2017 with an average age in the 24s. They got 24.7. Cardiff went the old route. They had 27 average age, Fulham 25. All had a negative net spend, 15, nearly 16 million for Wolves. They were the highest spenders that year. 8 for Cardiff, 3 for Fulham. You roll into the next season. Norwich, 2019 this is. Norwich, Sheffield United and Villa all went up. Sheffield United were the only ones who didn't have parachute payments. Net spend, Norwich made a profit. Sheffield United made a profit that year. Villa, minimal net spend. Stoke were the biggest spenders by quite a way. That year, Rovers came back up. We had Bradley Dack. We had those kind of players. Conway had all disappeared. Well, he was still there, wasn't he? But they were disappearing, those players. We all of a sudden had Richie Smallwood, who was being phased out, but we still had the Corey Evans of the world and Danny Grahams, but we did have a lot more youngsters playing. Niambi was playing. Lenihan was starting to get a game. Armstrong was coming. Now, this is the season that apparently our wages, this and the next, were at their highest. They started to build. We had the 6th youngest team that season under Mowbray, and our net spend was minus 9 million, more or less. So we signed Brereton, didn't we, that year? We signed Adam Armstrong on a permanent deal. You roll into the next season. We are, and bear in mind, our average age there is 25.3. So we are considerably lower. Leeds, West Brom, Fulham all go up to the Premier League. Leeds didn't have parachute payments that year. They made a profit of 26 million, but quite know what's going on there. West Brom made a profit and Fulham made a profit. Now, that's not unusual for the teams that have got parachute payments. They seem to be making a profit more and more. Average age-wise, all in the 26. Rovers was 25.9, 11th youngest. So that 11th youngest, it then massively drops. We have had a change of approach from 2020 onwards. So out went Graham, out went Mulgrew, out went Smallwood, out went Evans. All those players went, and we made a massive shift towards going down the youth route. This is when we've decided, Mowbray was still there, but do you know what? If we are going to be a sustainable club, we're going to grow ourselves. And I think I can tell why. So Reading were the biggest spenders that year, and that went very peaked on. Well, the 2 biggest spenders have not gone up those last 2 years, Stoke and Reading. And I think that's played a part here. The next season, Norwich go up, Watford go up, Brentford go up. Norwich and Watford both have parachute payments. Brentford don't. And Brentford had the average age of 24.4. That's the youngest any team has gone up since 2017. And I think what we've done is basically go, oh, look at Brentford. We'll have some of that. Look at Reading, look at Stoke. That didn't work. Let's bin that off. And we had the 5th youngest team. So ours was 24.9. And we've stayed in the 24s after. And only 2 teams since 2017 with an average age of in the 24s have been promoted. So it's an anomaly, really. So actually, we're too young, is what we're working out here. We then go into Fulham, Bournemouth and Forest in 2022. Fulham average age of 26 and Forest and Bournemouth around 25. Bournemouth, Fulham both got parachute payments. Forest didn't. But negative net spend for Fulham, 15 million. Negative net spend for Forest. We made a 14 million profit that year. The year before, we had a negative net spend of 1.5 roughly. These are all figures from Transfer Market, so how accurate they are is debatable. The year after, the Dingles go up, Sheffield United go up, Luton go up. Dingles and Sheffield United both had parachute payments again. Luton didn't. Luton are an anomaly. How have Luton done it then? So I'm looking at these anomalies here, really. Luton have done it by having an average age 26.9. So similarly, when Brighton didn't have parachute payments, they've gone down the experience route. Most of the teams that go up that have not had parachute payments have got loads of experience in their team. The majority of their players are experienced players. They are good, solid Championship pros. In some cases, they played League One. What they've also done, I thought, was not use as many players. Actually, that's not the case. And that would make sense when you dig down into it, which I have done a little bit more, is that what there's probably happened there is they've had a base of championship players, of a squad, and they have rotated where needed. So, for example, when we talked the other day about Danny Bath playing 3 really good games and then the 4th being too many, they've not done that. They have then rotated them in and out. And then last season, we go into Leicester, Ipswich, Sheffield, Southampton, sorry. Obviously, Leicester and Southampton had parachute payments. Ipswich didn't. Ipswich had a negative net spend of 4 million. Leicester and Southampton made profits. Leicester's was a 50 million. Southampton's was 130 odd million. Rovers made a profit, obviously, again, 22 million. Rovers have only made a profit 2 out of those seasons, but they've been big profits. The previous 2 seasons to this, the 2 biggest spenders have again not gone up, Norwich and Stoke. And I'm just going to focus on Rovers here. So we've had an average age of 26, got relegated, and we also have then gone into League One. Then we've had an average age of 25.3. We've had a highish wage bill, 6th youngest. Stoke have spent loads and have not gone up. Year after, we've had another negative net spend. We've got the 11th youngest team, 25.9. It's going up in age. We've got senior pros, big wages. Reading have spent loads of money. It's not worked again. They got Yapstam, if you remember that kind of era. And Rovers have gone, this has not worked for us again. We've gone for Brereton. We've gone to Gallagher. We've gone inexperienced in Mulgrew and Graham and Bennett. It's not working, this. We'll change our approach. Brentford's approach has seen them growing and growing and growing. And actually, ironically, the season after sees them go up. Let's go down that route. So Rovers have then gone 24.9. So they dropped a whole year, which doesn't sound a lot, but in the context of the Championship, that is massive, dropping that full year. 5th youngest team, negative net spend of $1 million or so. Year after, 2nd youngest team, this is 2022, Thomason, 24.1. That is the youngest average age in the Championship by 1,000,000 miles. The only one who comes close to it is Brentford, who went up with a 24.4 average, and they are an absolute anomaly, even, believe me. Then we go into last season, we have the 3rd youngest, 24.2, and the middle season's 2nd youngest, 24.3. So I've looked at it and gone, we were sold this project, but we had got the balance all wrong. Way too young. I know it was talked about, but it was way too young. We did spend some money. We've signed, we had a negative net spend in 23 because we had Smodics, we bought Britain, we bought one or two, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but we bought 1 or 2 others, didn't we? And it was still too young. The plan of, right, we're not giving Danny Bath a 2-year deal, so we didn't sign him, and then we brought him in this year. It was too far the other way. That rolls into this season. So then I've gone, where are we at right now? This season, so I'll just go through the averages, sorry, before I move on. So the average age of the teams going up in the Championship is 26.1. In that time, Rovers' average is 25. This season, Rovers' average age is 26.5. That is obviously, but near enough average of a team that goes up. Obviously, we've not got parachute payments. For the teams that haven't got parachute payments, take Brentford aside, that is bang average for the teams that go up. We've then, obviously, we have spent some money, but we've got a profit. We've used 23 players so far. The average that a team uses if they go up is 29. But this season, Mike, what rank in terms of the oldest team do you think we've got? Well, obviously,
okay, so I'd say we've got to be in the top 10 because we've got oldest. Because of McFadden being so old and Danny Bath.
I've done it youngest to oldest. So the youngest team being number 1, Sunderland, right down to 24. Where do Rovers sit in the table?
I'd say we've got one of the oldest teams. No, am I being wrong? Okay, I'd say we're somewhere in the middle to oldest.
So the youngest team rank-wise out of 24 we've ever had, we got relegated with 13th youngest. We're now 18th. So we now have one of the most experienced squads in the Championship.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bore everyone to death, but when I really deep dived into that, teams who sit around that and do okay use more players. They have to start rotating.
You have to.
They
Yeah.
have to do that more obvious reasons. So that's where stats back up your eye test and what you think is logical. So we've got to start doing that clever. We cannot just keep that winning team. You can't roll into the next game and go, well, they're winning, let's keep them. You can't do that. So I need to see in this 3-game week a real clever use of these players. I need to see Danny Bath, if he plays on Saturday and has a great game, he can't play the next 2. He might play one of them. So you've got to make a decision for me there. I like to keep a settle back 4. So is Danny Bath right to be one of those starting centre halves? I'm going to say no on that basis. I'm going to say you need to play Carter, you need to play Hyam, and Danny Bath be an able deputy, or you bring him on to shore a game up, or if you're going 3 at the back one game, these kind of things. Or if Carter's got a knock, you bring him in. In terms of parachute payments, I've had a look at all of that. Obviously, I've talked about it. 8 out of the 24 teams since 2017 have been promoted, haven't had parachute payments. And the biggest spenders so far are Middlesbrough. Only 3 out of the 8 biggest net spenders. Now, they're not the biggest spenders because then you start talking about, Southampton spent 18 million, but they brought in 150. So so that's why it's skewed a little bit. But 3 out of the 8 biggest spenders and net spenders in the lot since 2017 have gone up. So obviously 5 haven't. So spending money is not a guarantee. It is really not a guarantee. And actually, when you look at it, Reading have ended up in a right mess. Hull were very close to that last year and have had to sell them all. And Stoke are a basket case, and they've done it twice.
But yeah, I mean, this is something we spoke about last year, wasn't it? And we said about us having this young side, and you can tell they go into themselves when things don't go right, and you need those leaders. And what you've just been through there is, I mean, that's amazing work, mate. Fair play to you. It was something we actually spoke about, I think, last year, and we was talking about the names of players that teams had over 30 years old that got promoted. And, I think Burnley had 6, Sheffield United had 8, Luton 6, Fulham 5. And some of the names, like some of these teams had, like Gary Cahill, Fotheringham, Norwood, Kearney, Jack Colback, Lewis Graben, Pookie, they're all very experienced players in their own right that they just come together and they know what to do. And we said earlier in the season, didn't we? McFadgen, he's hardly playing, if at all, but he's a coach on the training ground. So, like, you see him in the training ground playing these games, but coaching whilst playing. And then he's on the sideline as a sub coaching. It's really important to have these players. And I'm glad you went through the finances, because it's kind of one of the reasons why I've slagged Villa off so much, because they've just spent so much money to get where they are. And, fair play. They've got there and they're in the Champions League now. But there's a lot of teams that have chucked a lot of money at it and failed, like you said.
Oh, absolute fortunes. I think what it does do is, I actually thought of FFP being the big problem, and I agree with it when I've looked at this. FFP is a massive issue. But what is still an issue, I think, is parachute payments. But actually, that's probably more to do with the wages. When you look at this, Southampton's parachute payments are a drop in. Well, they're not a drop in the ocean. That's an exaggeration. But they brought in 150 million. They've only spent 18 million last year. So is that because some of their players are overpriced still? Maybe. But you look at that lot down the road, and as much as I like to line them up and tell them they spent 200 odd million, they have spent 38 million a couple of years ago, and they've so far spent, about 50 million this year. But equally, they've made a profit both seasons. So
I don't mind if a team gets relegated and actually looks like they're trying to balance the books, and they're trying to offload some people. I hate it when they come down and there's obviously just sod it. We're going to have another go at it. We're going to keep everyone together on these high wages with these players and maybe spend a bit more and try and buy our way back. That's what winds me up. For me, parachute payments is there to help a club survive whilst they balance the books. I mean, FFP is a joke.
Yeah,
I could rant about FFP as well. When it comes to FFP, I feel like it's putting a lot of people off buying clubs because they want to come in, they want to spend their money, and they're not allowed because FFP doesn't allow them. So then people just don't buy clubs. But that, like I said, that's a deep conversation to have. But yeah, to go back to the start of what you were saying about the Brighton mould and the Brentford mould. It's not Football Manager. This isn't Football Manager. You don't just go and buy all the best players, young players, and then you save scum your way and to promotion and say this is the way to do it. It's not. You do have to have a balance. Like they say, it's about building a team, not collecting talent. You can't just stick a load of young lads together and say off you go. If you've got the 11 best youth players in the world, they would probably struggle to play against some extremely experienced championship sides that are just going to, do the dark arts against them. It's about the balance. You need your leaders. We've got it with McFadden, Bat, and Travis at the moment. Schmodix wasn't a young lad, last year. I mean, how old was he? 27, 28 last year?
Yeah.
So, he was a leader as well, but he wasn't young in any way. But I think what would be interesting for me to look at, and I'm not sure you did, was squad sizes as well. How big are the squads that got promoted?
I've looked at the players used. So the average players used is 29.6, and we've used 23 so far. Now, I actually thought, that'll be skewed a bit because of the 5 subs. It's not really made any difference, interestingly. You look at the season 2017, Newcastle used 30, Brighton used 28, Villa used 35. Last season, it's 27, 32, and 28. So it is a bit different, but it's not dramatically different. And that Aston Villa 35 was above any other team other than Watford. Well, Watford isn't really a surprise. Yeah, it's. I think in terms of the players used, it's more around the amounts of games. So they're quite spread out over the squads, which was really difficult to try and get down on sort of a stat, if you like. But in terms of the number of games, they've spread them out a lot more than, for example, last season than we did. And our youngsters, the other thing that we have noticeably done is our youngsters have played a lot more games. So it's not just about the youth element of the squad. Our average age of the teams every season has been we've had 2 or 3 starting 11s in the top 10. Sunderland have equally done the same. Sunderland, if you Google and have a look at the top 20 young starting 11s across the season, so that doesn't mean teams. It means if Sunderland have played us, Sunderland have played Luton, Sunderland have played Everton next season maybe, and those come out and they're starting 11s. Sunderland absolutely dominate that. Rovers though do feature in quite a few of them. But what I've noticed is you've got a massive disparity. So Aston Villa, for example, the season that they've gone up in 2019, have had 4 or 5 of their main players have been 27 to 29. And then they've had 22s to 24s. Rovers have had sub-22s, quite a lot, and then the odd above 30, and a massive chunk missing in the middle, where actually a player's at their peak. And that is the problem when you look at those teams coming down. It's actually the keeping hold of the players. So it's who they're keeping hold of rather than who they're bringing in. And that's where I think parachute payments are killing teams, because they are paying wages way above their station. And we cannot compete with that. We cannot go and get, let's say Smodix was on the market. We couldn't go and buy him now with the wages he would command. Could Burnley? Yeah, they could. Could Luton probably now? Yeah, they could. And that kills it. And the problem you would have is Stoke have been doing that and then they've had to sell them all. And Stoke are going through another cycle of the same thing. Norwich have done a gamble when you look at it. Norwich came down in 21-22 and have gambled the season after, being the biggest net spenders. Didn't work. Will it work this season? They're in their last year of FFP. Are they going to panic? And parachute payments, that'll start to all bite. So there's a couple of teams that's happened to. But yeah, I think what it's telling us is we've been way too young, which we knew. So that's backed up what we thought we knew. It's telling us that in terms of experience, I think we've got the balance better. But I'd actually argue we've maybe gone a little bit the other way. I think if we're going to have this age of a squad and team, we've got to get better at our rotation. So what it's kind of told me in the end has told me nothing that I didn't already know. It's backed up what we have all been saying all along. You've got to get the balance right, and we had it far too wrong the other way. And this year, the only way that balance works is if we're better at rotating. And that's my one concern with Eustace, is his approach of, if you're playing well, you keep the shirt. I don't think it's as straightforward as that anymore. I don't think you can just be that.
No.
Stick to that rule quite too stringently.
No, definitely not. The game's changed. Back in the day, you just got a few. I mean, going back to what you said, actually, back in the day, when we was in Division 1, you could offer Premier League players that were just on their way down a decent wage compared to what they were on in the Premier League, and they would come and just to get those final games. So that's why we did get your Henningbergs, your Craig Shorts, and your Friedels at the time. And now, like you say, the disparity between low-end Premier League wages to even high-end Championship wages of just players that have played in the Championship with no Premier League experience is absolutely unreal. I mean, the notes I'd made for a previous pod when I was talking about our experienced players, because it was a big topic, wasn't it, for us when we was talking about the youth. In 2022, the only player we had over 30 was Ayala. 2021, it was Ayala and Bradley Johnson. 2020, it was Bradley Johnson, Evans, Downing, and Bennett. It's not like we've had this amount of experience that actually were playing games. Ayala didn't really play. Bradley Johnson, he was in and out of the team. Like you said, a lot of the teams getting promoted, like you say about Villa, disgusting team that they are, they had key players with experience playing, and that is what you kind of need. And I'm glad those stats came up. The only issue we have is our leaders at the moment, like you say, they're not exactly ones that can play week in, week out. So, Vyman, he can't play week in, week out doing the role that he's playing. Like we said, he'd probably have to change roles if he did want to play week in, week out. But Fadgen's never going to play more than one game. Has he started a game for us this season? Don't think he has. Nope. I can't really see him starting a game. Danny Batt, like you said, he needs a break. And would you say Travis is now one of our experienced players?
Travis is one of the few players we've got in that peak age. So they are the players that you rely on to be at peak performance, to have a very good average performance, and to play the most regular. I think our average, if you look at it, is 26.5. Last season, the team without parachute payments was Ipswich, 26.4. Season before that, Luton, 26.9. So we're floating around where we probably need to be in terms of experience-wise. But what it has done is meant that our average wage will be going up this year. So I think it was mentioned in the forum minutes, but something that we have done is we've made a conscious decision that actually your average wage needs to be higher, because that's where you get your good, solid pros who are saying, do you know what? I'm not up and coming. I need a decent wage here. I know what I'm worth, and I'll get it somewhere else. And we've obviously made a commitment to do that. So I think that's a good thing. Not that we're paying more wages, but that we're willing to get those players at the right time. What I do think we need to do is now make sure we're utilising those players right. So they've got to be used right. And equally, we've got to expect more of them. So Lewis Travis should be one of our highest performers. Sondre Tronstad should be one of our highest performers. And if they're not, then we can't afford to have them sitting around. And that brings us back to the outgoings this summer. Sammy Smodic park him, but Sam Gallagher had to go. Sam Gallagher will have been one of our highest earners. We don't know the wages of the players, but his average age, he should be at his peak. And we couldn't rely on him for games or output. So he's got to be moved on. If Maktar Gueye, we can't rely on him this year, you could say, well, do you know what? He's a year into it. You know, he's only just settled into the Championship. But equally, he's got to be performing week in, week out. So, yeah, I think we can expect more consistent performances. And if we don't get them, then fine. But I take it right back to John Williams used to say, if you put a league table of the wages of the squads and then you put the actual league table, very few places will be out. You'll get the odd anomaly. But generally speaking, if you are the top wage payers in the Championship or as a Premier League at the time, you will finish high up in the league. If you pay the least wages, you will finish very much near the bottom. So the fact Rovers have increased their wages rather than going out and spending massive transfer fees, I think that's sound logic.
Mate, cheers for going through all that. That was great information. I think it's really interesting. Like you say, it backs up things that we've been saying, which is nice. And hopefully we're on the right track as a club to follow that, model now.
Well, yeah, I mean, some people say, well, you've got to go youth and grow it. There's only Brentford that have gone up that way. And I've even, I have gone further into it. I'm not going to go into it now, but looking at teams that have gone really young and seeing how they grow, it doesn't work. Nobody's done it. Brentford are the only ones. Now, Sunderland might butt that trend this year. And if they do, fair play to them. They have tried to go young, but they're not actually growing in age. They're just getting younger. They're selling them when they get to the right age. So it'll be interesting to watch them, but nobody else has done it. So going with a young team and letting them grow together doesn't seem to work, because when they get to a decent age or if they're performing, somebody picks them off you. So actually, it's not short-termism going and doing what we're doing right now, which has been the argument to it. Actually, having an experienced team just looks like it makes business sense and footballing sense.
But I feel like people who say that, they just play Football Manager and FIFA and don't understand the real world.
Yeah.
No, mate, that was really good. And guys, put your comments down below what you think of the situation. Do you think we should be going youth? Do you think we need more experience? Are you happy with Rovers' transfer policy now and where we're going? Because I think Mark's proved that we're on the right track, and that's the main thing for Rovers fans. We just want to make sure we're on the right track, and we thought we was on the right track before, but we feel like there's something going on now, which is good. And yeah, hopefully this now gets some players through the door that are experienced, that just want that one last hurrah and one last go. And we're a very popular club for players. Not many players leave us and say that they didn't like their experience at Blackburn Rovers.
No.
And we could have a chance to actually build something here where we can say, well, look at the young players we've had. So we can go to a young player and say, well, look what we've done for Adam Wharton. We're not going to stand in your way. Then we can look at the ones that are at their peak and say, well, look at Sammy Smodic. We gave him a chance and we didn't stand in his way. And then we can look at the older players and say, well, look at Danny Batt and so on. We will give you an opportunity to play. So, yeah, hopefully we're now on the right path. But Mark, cheers for that one, but I'm going to stick with you. Do you want to give us your answer for Retro Rovers before we get into one last mailbag question that I have?
I do. So, from Great Hold Town, my journey began. At Rovers under Hughes, I became a part of the plan. Ince also saw my talent, but Big Sam let me go. Next up was Greece, where all my goals still show. I continued to travel Cyprus, Australia, and India too, but you'll always remember me as a super sub in the white and blue. It was, of course, Mike,
Mr. Matty Derbyshire.
It was. Yeah. Now, obviously, Matt Derbyshire 1 second, is a Rovers legend, but he's actually more importantly a Great Harwood Town legend, which is where, well, actually, we came across each other at Darwin, but yes, Great Harwood Town, we did come across each other. It was very, very strange then watching him in the colours of Rovers. It was very strange watching and listening to the crowd chanting his name when he scored at Wigan. I think that might have been his first goal, and they're all singing his name. It was very, very weird. But in terms of being a super sub, Mike, he played 86 games for Rovers and scored 20 goals. He's currently the second, this is still the same stat, as the most goals as a sub since 1991. Now, the way we are going this season, if we're not careful, we're gonna bump somebody off this list. So Darbs was second with 11. Can you have a guess at number 1 with 12 or number 3 with 9? So the top goals as a sub since 1991. That's ages ago. That's when I started watching football.
Is Kevin Gallagher one of them?
No. They are both one Championship era, first time around, and then one pretty recent.
Okay. I'm going to say Jason Roberts.
It is not. It is the one and only Sir Matt Jansen with 12.
Sir Matt Jansen.
Yeah. And then with 9 goals, it is your hero.
Oh, no, don't say Sam Gallagher.
It is Sam Gallagher.
Oh, no. The more we talk about him, the more I feel like I've got him wrong.
You haven't.
But no, Matty Derbyshire, what a player. I mean, when I said at the start about him being a cult hero, he was a cult hero because, like you say, he was bought for not much. Wasn't there a bag of kit involved or something like that, I heard?
But there was, I think it was about 20 grand. I actually don't think Harwood was supposed to get a cut of either a future fee or whatever it was. But we used to play at the showground in Great Harwood. And attached to the showground was our clubhouse. And attached to the clubhouse was Monroe's, the famous nightclub that people used to say was in Blackburn. It was in Great Harwood. And one day we turned up to play and there was a car in the middle of Monroe's that had been burnt out and had set fire. And that damage knackered all the electrics. It knackered the whole thing. So you couldn't use the clubhouse, you couldn't use the changing rooms. So the club had to find a new home temporarily, which Accrington Stanley lent us the Crown Ground. And there is a bizarre rule, Mike, that if you are a non-league club, you can share a ground with another non-league club. When you become a league club, you cannot share your ground with a non-league club. So when Stanley got promoted, that was great news around here for everybody apart from Great Harwood Town. And to fix the repair bill was somewhere in the region of about £1 million, I think, which obviously was just not doable. So Great Harwood Town then became no more. So Accrington Stanley going into the Football League in a roundabout way ended Great Harwood Town. Yeah.
Selfish of them. Selfish.
Wow, how rude.
But obviously there was, to go back to what you said about being a sub, he was a cult villain for Borough fans. My mate's a Borough fan. And I remember him calling me saying, F Matt Derbyshire. And I said, I know, because he just said all he did was literally get subbed on, didn't even break stride. Corner comes in, knocks it in, doesn't even break stride, carries on celebrating. I just remember that goal.
Yep. I remember the other one when Middlesbrough as well. Santa Cruz debut, came on a sub. McCarthy got injured, didn't he? Santa Cruz scored a good header. Darbs, edge of the box, thing that curled it across the keeper. What a finish that was. But what a good career, to be fair to him. He obviously went to Olympiacos after us. Absolutely revered over there. I think he scored against their big rivals in a cup final. But he was just, I mean, he lived out. That was the closest thing that, obviously, being a Rovers player was like, I went to watch them. It was not attainable. So to see somebody that you play with actually go and do that was like, wow. I'm sat here at 38 thinking, well, maybe if Travis gets a knock, there's still a chance. You never know.
I mean, he was a talented player. I mean, he was clinical. Didn't we say that he was one of our most clinical ones in the stats?
I think he was in your stats, weren't he? Yeah.
Yeah, so clinical player. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy. And now he's back coaching.
So, I mean, obviously, for those that don't know, he when we were at Darwin as young lads, I went to go out of town, and our manager at the time, Andy McNally, was worked at the community trust at the Brick. There was him. There's assistant manager for us, Scott Parsons, who also dressed up as Roy. Interesting fact for you. And they took Darbs in as a young lad, as a community coach. So he was coaching there. Then he obviously had to leave that when he was then training at the academy. And he's gone back. Yeah, he's doing some coaching, I believe, with the under-18s potentially. Started his own business as well. So hopefully we're trying to badger him to get him on here, and he can tell everyone all about it. So we'll not say too much, but yeah.
Hopefully he does. No, that's a good one. But we normally do the mailbag before then, because I just wanted to mention something about the mailbag. So we had a couple of problems with our emails where I didn't realise how many people had emailed in and they'd got blocked for some reason. But I've managed to unblock them. So we are going to go through some of them. They are back now in our inbox. I will go through them ones, but we wanted to do this parachute payment discussion and promotion discussion first. So we will go through some of those, so you haven't been ignored. But there was one on Twitter from one of our guys that have listened to us quite a lot for Leston Page, and he put, being a passionate Welsh Rovers fan and relevant to the international weekend, who would be your top 3 Welsh Rovers players of all time. So for our Welsh fans out there, for a start, I apologise if I've ever moaned about Wales or anything like that, because I think I may have done in the past. So, Mark, can you think of any names that would make your top 3 to start with?
Just first, Mark, I think you're all right with Wales. Scottish football, you definitely can't travel across the border that way. But
yeah, I've definitely made about Scottish football. I've got Scottish relatives as well, and
I don't think
I'll quite happily tell them.
Yeah. Other than the fact I've been to watch Rovers at Swansea and Cardiff and didn't realise how far Cardiff is beyond Swansea, and had thoroughly miserable time both times around.
That drive is not easy. I have to work in Bridgend quite a bit, you see, and that annoys me. But anyway,
I trained it, and it was a lovely night out. The games were the worst part of it. Anyway, right. So recent players we've had Owen Beck, Jack Vale, Sober Thomas, Ryan Hedges, Tom Lawrence, Adam Henley, Jason Brown, Craig Bellamy, Robbie Savage, Mark Hughes, Nathan Blake. Yeah. So they're the only ones that I remember. I think there was Anthony Williams who was a keeper, but I don't really remember him, for being honest. For me, I'm going to say, do you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go Savage 1, just because he played longer. Bellamy 2, he was the best of the lot, though. And I'm going to go Mark Hughes because he nearly stamped on a Burnley player, and then he was our manager.
Okay, so I agree with that, but I'm going to go slightly different. I'm going to say, I know who my number 1 is, and I think everyone else probably knows who my number 1's going to be. So I'm going to say my number 1 is Ryan Hedges, because he's my boy.
Of course it is.
So that's my recent one. I can't say Jack Vale. The kid's done my head in. So I'm going to say, Tom Lawrence was Welsh.
Wow. I mean, he plays for him, doesn't he? But he didn't really play.
Okay, so I'm going to say, number 1, Ryan Hedges. Number 2, Nathan Blake, just because he was funny, and Chris Coleman. He did all right, didn't he? He did.
Well, yeah, he came, didn't he? The season after we won the league, so we signed him and Matty Holmes instead of Zidane and Dugarry. Slick back hair, good-looking bloke. Got bad injury, I think, at Rose, didn't he? Quite early on, and
bad break. Yeah,
I'm quite excited about him though, because obviously we had Hendrick, Gale, Ian Pearce. We were short a bit at centre half. He was left-footed. He'd done well at Palace. We spent $4.5 million on him, did we? it was a shame that because we did need somebody that was a
he was a
quality
talented
centre-back.
player. Talented player.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for the cult hero status top three of Hedges, Blake, and Coleman. You're going to go based on pure ability of Savage, Bellamy, and Hughes.
Well,
everyone else put down.
Caveat: Savage, I'm not saying he's better than Bellamy, but Bellamy was only there a year. He was the best of the lot, but he also went on to assistant manager at Burnley, so I couldn't put him at one. Sorry, you've ruined it, Craig.
Fair enough, but no, that was a great question, Lestin, and yeah, we might have a look at this going forwards for other nations, but that could be a difficult one. But yeah, people email into theblackburnend@gmail.com. Mark puts out the tweets as well. Just make sure you reply to them. Any questions, anything you want to know. We do make a list. We are going to go through the emails. Apologies that we missed them. But Mark, we said it would be a quick one today, but we're still on an hour and 30 minutes. We just love chatting Rovers and football, don't we?
We cannot get away from that hour and 30-minute mark, can we? Right, so question of the week this week, Mike. We're going to whack out. I'm going to do it literally now. So by the time you're listening to this, it's already out. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Is who are the top 3 most overrated Rovers players ever?
Ooh. Now, I know ones that you've mentioned, and I'll tell you what, they are going to be conversation starters, Mark.
I will. Do you know what? This week, just for a laugh, I'm going to reply to it on X. I'll let people just start, and then I'm just going to go fishing.
But it's going to be a good one, guys. Make sure you are on X. Make sure you're liking, you're subscribing, you're sharing, you're telling everyone about the pod. We are going to continue doing this. We enjoy doing it. Hopefully you enjoy listening. If you do, if you don't, I don't care. Just keep sharing, keep subscribing. It's great. If you've got anything you want us to talk about, let us know. But Mark, look forward to the weekend, and hopefully we'll be talking positive on Monday.
Absolutely. And no, we're not announcing a new sponsorship with Under Armour, but we're just not in sync, Mike. That's what it is.
Do you know what? We're both stylish guys, aren't we? We love a bit of Under Armour. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you enjoy it. Comment down below on everything we've spoken about and any questions. And yeah, have a good weekend, guys.